This is
The
unacceptable.
sirens
I
weren't
demand you
screaming
fix
yet,
this
but the
right now.
neighborhood
I'm
felt
sorry,
like
but I
it was
can't do
seconds
that.
from
You will
exploding.
or else.
Imagine standing on your own driveway, sunshine warm on your back, birds chirping like it's the perfect morning, and suddenly a storm named Karen arrives, rage boiling, phone clutched like a weapon. That was us. That was the moment everything changed. My wife had just stepped outside to water the flowers when the HOA president marched across the street with fury in her eyes. "You don't belong here," she screeched, voice slicing through the still morning air like shattered glass. "You and your wife are violating HOA rules by even living here. I'm giving you one final warning, leave." My wife, Hannah, didn't say a word. She just smiled politely, adjusted her glasses, and turned the hose toward the roses, like this was all perfectly normal. Maybe she knew what was coming. Maybe she had been waiting for someone to test her. Karen got louder. "I'm calling 911 right now. You're trespassing. You're going to jail." The world seemed to pause. Kids down the street froze mid-bike ride. A delivery driver slowed to watch. Neighbors peeked through blinds like prairie dogs. I could feel every heartbeat within 5 houses slamming inside their chests. But Hannah didn't flinch. She didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She glanced at me, calm as a cloud on a windless day, and whispered, "Let her." That's when the chill shock hit me. Because my wife wasn't just any homeowner. She wasn't some powerless stranger Karen could chase away. Hannah worked for the state. Not just behind a desk. Not just in some dusty bureaucratic corner. She was the newly appointed assistant superintendent of the state police. Meaning the very people Karen thought she was calling were the ones my wife could command with a single sentence. Karen stabbed the call button like she was detonating a bomb. 911, what's your emergency?" Her voice trembled as she explained, twisting reality to paint herself as the hero against an invader. She had no idea every officer would soon learn the truth. And the moment she said our address, the game was set in motion. Within minutes, the entire street would be flashing blue and red lights, not for us, but for her. And that was only the beginning. The call traveled faster than gossip, faster than lightning. Dispatchers recognized the name, supervisors perked up, radios crackled, and somewhere downtown, a chief paused mid-coffee sip and muttered, "Oh no, not her street." Lines lit like a Christmas tree. Squad cars pivoted, engines roared. My wife remained still, roses sparkling with droplets, looking like she was watering calm into chaos. And I realized, Karen had just woken a giant she never knew existed. The neighborhood would never forget that moment. Ever. Truly unforgettable. The first patrol car rounded the corner so fast the tires squealed, lights flashing like lightning on repeat. Karen puffed up with triumph, waving her free hand like she owned the whole city. "There they are. About time," she barked, pacing across the driveway, confident she'd just summoned her own personal army. She had no idea she'd just declared war on herself. The cruiser rolled to a stop at the curb. The officer stepped out cautiously, big boots, crisp uniform, hand near his belt, ready for anything. And then he saw Hannah. The entire temperature of the street changed. Recognition flickered across his face first, confusion next, and finally dawning realization. "Ma'am, Assistant Superintendent," he asked awkwardly, almost stumbling into a salute. His radio squawked in his hand before Karen could speak. Dispatch was already ahead of him. Karen froze, mid-gesture. "What? No, you're here for them." She jabbed her finger at us like we were trespassers stealing air. The officer shook his head slowly, eyes locked on Hannah with urgent respect. "Ma'am, we had no idea you lived in this district. Command has been looking for you." Karen screeched, "Look at me. I'm the HOA president. They are invading private property." But the officer ignored her. His voice lowered. "We're getting multiple alerts from HQ. The state chief wants immediate confirmation that you're all right." More sirens echoed. Not one car, not two, a caravan, SUVs, patrol units, even an unmarked sedan, rolling in like a presidential procession. Neighbors lined porches in disbelief. Karen panicked. "Why are there so many? This is a simple eviction." Another officer jumped out, saluted sharply. "Assistant Superintendent Hannah Lewis, Chief Marshal requesting your presence at Central." Karen gasped so loudly I swear birds took flight. "Assistant? What?" Hannah finally turned to her. "Calm. almost gentle. You didn't ask my name, Karen. You just demanded I disappear. Karen's face drained of color. But, HOA rules. Front yard watering times, your grass length. The officers exchanged confused looks. Nobody knew whether to laugh or cuff her for wasting emergency resources. Hannah approached her slowly, not with anger, but authority wrapped in ice. You called the police on the police. Karen's voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. But the street felt like a courtroom. And every blinking light was her sentence. Hannah leaned close enough for only Karen to hear. Next time, maybe knock first. The neighborhood held its breath. The authority tables had flipped. And this was only the second chapter of Karen's unraveling. Blue and red lights flickered across every house as the police convoy settled, but the strangest part was how silent everything felt. Neighbors lined their driveways like spectators at a championship match, eyes wide, mouths hanging. Karen, trembling now, looked smaller than she ever had, her confidence shrinking under reality's weight. Hannah remained composed, her hands folded gently in front of her, like a judge waiting for testimony. The officer closest to her received another radio message, listened, then nodded sharply. Command wants confirmation, he said, voice respectful and absolutely calm inside. Hannah stepped forward and spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. Officer, please proceed. Her tone wasn't arrogant, it was steady, practiced, almost comforting. Karen's jaw twitched, disbelief etched into every inch of her expression. This is ridiculous, she muttered, though her voice cracked as if even she didn't believe the words. The officer turned toward the crowd, informing them that the state police presence was precautionary protocol, nothing more. But several neighbors exchanged glances, clearly realizing something much larger simmered beneath Karen's petty complaint than anyone expected that morning there. The unmarked sedan's back door opened, and out stepped Chief Marshal himself, a tall man with sharp eyes and an expression carved from stone. The neighborhood gasped collectively. Karen blinked at him, then suddenly looked as though she wished she could rewind time. Assistant Superintendent Lewis, he said, acknowledging Hannah with a nod. Apologies for the commotion. Hannah answered respectfully, but her gaze flicked toward Karen briefly. The look wasn't cruel, it was simply honest acknowledgement of someone who had tried swinging far above her league on this strange chaotic morning indeed. Chief Marshal addressed the growing cluster of curious adults and whispering kids. There is no threat here, he announced, his voice echoing confidence. A misunderstanding took place, and it is being resolved. Karen flailed her arms desperately. You can't just ignore me. I called you. The chief looked at her properly for the first time. Ma'am, he stated, choosing his words carefully, emergency systems exist for emergencies, not personal disagreements. A ripple of murmurs rolled down the street like wind rustling leaves from one shocked neighbor to the next silently passing judgment. Hannah finally stepped toward Karen, stopping only a few feet away. We're your neighbors, she said softly. Not criminals. You escalated this. Karen's chin quivered as she absorbed the truth. Her voice shrank. I thought I was protecting rules. Hannah nodded. Rules don't replace humanity. The chief backed her up. We enforce law, not pettiness. Several neighbors nodded, emboldened by authority's clarity. For the first time, Karen seemed to see the community she had alienated standing before her, united in common sense on that bright unforgettable suburban morning together at long last. Karen stood frozen, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver on a sinking ship. The WA guidelines she once treated as sacred armor suddenly looked like flimsy scraps of paper. For years, she'd enforced those rules with iron fists and a voice sharp enough to cut glass. But today, the very foundation she stood on was cracking beneath her. The chief turned to his officers and gave a small nod. Instantly, the convoy relaxed. Radios quieted. Tension evaporated like steam rising from sunlit pavement. But Karen remained tense, coiled like a spring that suddenly realized it had been wound too tight for far too long in this overly controlled suburban world unchanged. One officer stepped closer and gently asked, Ma'am, do you understand the consequences of misusing emergency services? Karen's knees literally wobbled. I didn't misuse anything, she insisted, her voice wobbling too. They're violating code. They're watering the lawn on an unapproved day. Several neighbors covered their mouths to hide smiles. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Hannah sighed. Not with annoyance, but with something close to sadness. "We're new," she reminded her. "You never introduced yourself. You never explained anything. You just barge across lawns and threaten, instead of welcoming those who simply moved next door willingly." Karen gulped hard. "I enforce the standards that keep this neighborhood safe, maintained, organized." But her voice sounded hollow now, like even she knew the words carried less meaning than she'd always believed. The chief crossed his arms. "Safe is when neighbors know each other. When they talk before calling for backup." His tone wasn't cruel. It was instructional, like he was correcting a rookie mistake. Karen flinched. "I didn't know who she was," she said, gesturing weakly toward Hannah. "I assumed." Hannah raised a hand, stopping her. "That we were beneath you," she finished gently. The words hit harder than any yell. Karen swallowed, eyes darting away. The chief stepped forward. "You have two options," he told Karen clearly. "File a formal complaint through proper channels, which will likely be dismissed due to lack of actual violation, or apologize and resolve this like adults." Karen opened her mouth, then shut it again. Her pride flared. Her cheeks burned, but reality had cornered her. And the corner was tight. Neighbors watched silently, waiting to see which version of Karen would emerge. The tyrant, or the human being beneath the armor she'd worn far too proudly till today. Finally, her voice cracked. "I may have overreacted." A murmur rippled. Shock, approval, relief. Hannah nodded once. "That's a start." Karen looked at the police lights still painting the houses red and blue and whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Hannah's response was calm. But it did, and everyone understood something had permanently shifted in Karen's rulebook. Heart and home forever changed. For the first time all morning, Karen wasn't the loudest voice on the street. The neighbors, who had hovered at the edges like nervous spectators, finally stepped forward. One woman from 3 houses down, usually shy and quiet, cleared her throat softly. "Karen, we've wanted to say something for a while." Her cheeks flushed with color, but courage held her steady. "You scare people," she continued. "You don't ask questions, you assume the worst." Karen blinked, her shoulders rising defensively, but she didn't speak. For once, she could only listen. A father holding a toddler nodded in agreement. "I've lived here 4 years, he said. "My kids call you the lawn lady because they think you'll fine them for stepping on grass." The crowd chuckled lightly, but the warmth of the laughter didn't seem to reach Karen. Her eyes remained fixed on the sidewalk as if she were hoping it would swallow her whole rather than face the unfolding truth before her fully exposed now. Another neighbor, a retired teacher, took a step closer. "Karen, nobody wants to fight with you," she said. "But you've turned this street into a battlefield." Her tone was firm, not cruel. "WA rules should help build community, not destroy it." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Hannah watched quietly, saying nothing for now. She didn't need to. The neighborhood itself was speaking the lesson Karen had long refused to learn. A teenager leaned against his bike and shrugged. "We just want to live," he added bluntly. "My dad said you fined him once because the trash can was 6 inches too far from the curb." Laughter rolled more freely this time, not mocking, just relieved. A shared moment of honesty. Karen hugged her clipboard to her chest, the only shield she had left. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "I thought I was protecting the neighborhood." Hannah stepped forward just enough to be seen without overshadowing anyone. "You might have believed that," she said calmly. But somewhere along the way, protecting became controlling. Karen's eyes lifted, and for the first time, tears glimmered, not rage, not frustration, but something raw. Vulnerability. "Nobody ever said anything," she murmured. The retired teacher sighed gently. "We tried," she said. "You sent warning letters for even bringing it up." Gasps spread. The truth was out fully. Karen wavered, shaky as if the weight of everyone's stories toppled the tower she'd built. Hannah offered the opening everyone hoped for. "You don't have to be the enemy," she said. "You can still lead, but with us, not against us." The entire crowd seemed to breathe at once, as if the street itself exhaled long-held tension released from many years of conflict finally melting away now slowly. Karen swallowed hard. The power she'd clung to was crumbling, but maybe, just maybe, something better could rise from its ruins. The police presence that once felt like Karen's weapon now hovered awkwardly around her like an unwanted spotlight. Officers milled quietly, exchanging sideways glances as the neighborhood spilled years of frustration into the open air. Hannah rested her watering hose and finally stepped toward the porch. Her confidence wasn't loud, it didn't need to be. She walked with the measured calm of someone who had spent years making decisions that mattered far beyond lawn heights and recycling bins in countless unpredictable real emergencies day after day calmly resolved. Karen stumbled back a step as Hannah approached, her clipboard slipping lower in her grasp. "Why didn't you just tell me who you were?" she blurted, voice cracking under the pressure of everything unraveling at once. Hannah paused on the bottom step, her expression thoughtful rather than triumphant. "Because I didn't move into this neighborhood to be saluted," she answered softly. "I moved here to live, just like everyone else." The chief nodded silently, backing the sentiment with quiet authority. One officer, younger and earnest, took a hesitant step forward. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "your report forces our system into emergency mode. The next call we ignore could cost someone their life." Karen winced as though she'd been physically struck. She clutched her clipboard harder, knuckles turning white. "I didn't think," she started, but the words evaporated. That was the truth, the raw, uncomfortable truth she'd never allowed herself to face. Then something unexpected happened. The crowd began to shift, not in anger now, but invitation. The father with the toddler offered a small smile. The teenager pushed his bike upright and stood straighter. Even the shy neighbor seemed bolder. Hannah could feel it. The neighborhood's heart opening. "Nobody's perfect," she said gently. "But we're all here. We can work together, or we can fight each other forever." The tiredness in her voice hinted at battles she'd fought far beyond one street, battles where unity meant survival. Karen's lips trembled, her chin quivered. "I don't know how to be anything else," she whispered, surprising everyone. Vulnerability cracked through her rigid shell like sunlight through storm clouds. Hannah stepped closer, leaving the protection of her porch entirely. "Then learn," she replied, a challenge, but also a promise. "Start today." The chief gave a slight nod, signaling his officers to stand down fully. Patrol cars cut their flashing lights. Engines hummed instead of roared. The neighborhood exhaled as if waking from a spell. Karen finally loosened her grip, clipboard dropping to her side. "I want to fix this," she said. The simplicity of the statement landed like thunder. Humble, late, but real. Hannah smiled. Not mockingly, not smugly. "Good," she said, "because the story isn't over yet. It's just finally headed in the right direction." With the flashing lights fading and the street returning to something resembling normal, the neighbors didn't scatter. Not this time. Instead, they clustered in small groups, talking, laughing nervously, releasing tension they didn't realize they'd been holding for years. The transformation was almost visible, like a weight had been lifted off the entire block after too long living under fear disguised as order for so many days on end. Karen lingered near the curb, standing apart but not fleeing. It was the first time in memory she wasn't telling someone what to do. The father with the toddler walked toward her cautiously. "I can help you put together a friendlier welcome packet," he offered. New people shouldn't feel like they're walking into a military checkpoint. Karen sniffed, eyes still red. "I was trying to keep standards," she said, voice small. The father shrugged warmly. "Standards are fine, but maybe start with the word hello." Hannah watched from her porch with quiet pride, not for herself, but for the street. Her wife touched her shoulder, sensing the moment. "You did good," she murmured. Hannah shook her head. "They did." But she understood her role. Sometimes power isn't exercised through enforcement, but through calm, presence, and patience. Something Karen had never understood until today. A few kids rolled their bikes back into motion, circling near Karen but not avoiding her. One even waved. That tiny gesture might as well have been a fully rebuilt bridge. Karen blinked away another tear. "I didn't realize how isolated I'd become," she admitted softly. The retired teacher joined her. "The rules swallowed you," she said kindly. "They were supposed to serve us, not control us." Karen nodded slowly, absorbing every word, letting go of her clipboard as though it were a chain link. For the first time, she seemed human instead of authoritarian decoration. "Maybe I should take a break," she murmured. Let someone else run things for a while. A ripple of relief and support spread across the group. Hannah stepped forward, stopping just close enough. Or, she suggested carefully, you can stay, just lead differently. Let us help. Karen looked from face to face. The father, the teacher, the kids, Hannah. The community she thought she was protecting had become the one rescuing her. I don't know if I deserve that, she whispered. Hannah shook her head gently. Deserving doesn't matter, choosing does. At that moment, the street felt like more than sidewalks and lawns. It felt like a tribe forming, finally connected by conversations instead of complaints. Karen took a shaky breath. Okay, she said, voice steadier. I'll try. And with that small sentence, something deeper than policy shifted, a neighborhood finally reclaimed by the people who lived in it, not the rules that governed it. The street softened under the new quiet, as though the morning finally remembered it was supposed to be peaceful. The red and blue flashes dimmed, no longer slicing the air like emergency blades but fading into normal daylight. Officers stood beside open cruiser doors, watching, not guarding, not intervening, just absorbing what few police ever witness, a neighborhood repairing itself without a single citation or pair of handcuffs. Hannah placed her hose on the porch rail, sealing the scene in her own quiet, steady way. Her wife handed her the glowing tablet, its soft light reflecting against her confident, calm eyes. Karen, however, still stood like someone who misplaced her script and suddenly realized she was in the wrong play. Her clipboard dangled uselessly, as though it weighed more now than ever before. The chief approached with a composed stride. Before we clear the scene, he said, we need to address your 911 call. His tone set firm boundaries, but it wasn't cruel. Karen swallowed and nodded. I understand, she murmured, no longer defensive, only sincere. An officer stepped forward and outlined the consequences. Diverted patrol units, delayed responses, emergency channel priority triggers. Each detail hit harder than the last, and Karen's shoulders sagged under the invisible load. I thought you were the solution, she whispered. Not something that could take help away from someone who truly needed it. The chief gestured toward the listening neighbors. Emergencies belong to us, he said. But communities belong to you. When a community talks, we don't have to be here. His words sank deep, not just into Karen, but into the entire crowd. She nodded slowly. I'll accept responsibility, she said quietly, but clearly. The chief inclined his head. This will be filed as a warning. Make it count. The retired teacher rested a gentle hand on Karen's arm. Rules should guide people, she said, not crush them. The father with the toddler added, we were never your enemies. Even the teenager on the bike gave a tiny nod. Karen looked at each face, some familiar, most strangers she'd never truly met, and saw, for the first time, people she lived among, not obstacles she managed. Hannah turned toward her, voice warm but steady. We all make mistakes, she said. The difference is what we choose afterward. Karen released a trembling breath, like exhaling years of pent-up tension. Then I choose to do better, she promised. The neighborhood collectively breathed with her. Engines turned over, doors shut. As officers drove away, the street felt lighter, clearer, finally ready for something better to grow among the houses that had always been waiting. The police convoy rolled away slowly, one car at a time, until nothing remained but tire tracks glimmering lightly on sun-warmed pavement. Silence followed, but not the tense, fearful silence of earlier. This was peaceful, filled with possibility. For the first time since sunrise, the street felt like what it was supposed to be, a neighborhood, not a battleground. Hannah stepped back into her yard, hose still coiled gently in the grass, roses sparkling like they had been audience members all morning observing the storm and smiling at its passing beyond fully now. Karen stood in the open, clipboard no longer clutched like armor but held loosely, as though she wasn't sure if she should keep it, drop it, or turn it into something new entirely. Her cheeks still carried the faint mark of embarrassment, but there was a softer glow in her eyes, a dawning awareness of how much better life could be if she stopped guarding rules and started guarding relationships. Neighbors lingered close, suddenly eager, almost hungry, to fill the empty space with something kinder. The shy woman offered a small laugh. Never thought our street would make headlines, she joked, easing tension. The teenager added, at least it's not because of a raccoon invasion. Laughter broke like a wave, light, relieving, healing. Even Karen cracked a smile, something rare and unfamiliar on her face but surprisingly genuine, like sunlight peeking through reluctant clouds after thunder peeled away down distant skies bravely. Hannah walked toward her, extending a hand, not a surrender, not a victory salute, but an invitation. Karen hesitated only a moment before taking it. "Welcome," Hannah said quietly, as if the word had been overdue for years. Karen blinked, shock mixing with gratitude. "To what?" she asked. Hannah gestured around her. "Houses, lawns, families, faces." "To the neighborhood," she replied simply. "Really, finally, the neighborhood." A ripple of cheers, soft, scattered, heartfelt, followed. Karen cleared her throat. "I guess I'll start with a potluck," she offered awkwardly. "I've never done one." The retired teacher clapped her hands. "We'll help." The father hoisted his toddler onto his hip. "We've been waiting for this." The teenager pumped a fist. "I call dessert duty." And suddenly, planning replaced complaining, ideas replaced warnings. Before long, chalk lines on driveways marked games, someone dragged out folding tables, and kids zipped back and forth with newfound freedom. The street transformed. No longer overrun by assumptions and rules, but connected by energy, laughter, and something the morning never promised. Community. Hannah turned to her wife, both smiling softly. "Imagine," she whispered, "all this from one 911 call." Her wife chuckled. "Sometimes, people need a crisis to see what was missing." Karen nodded thoughtfully. "Not just crisis," she said. "A second chance." And for the first time, everyone agreed.